It's Monday, April 17th. Welcome, everybody. I am still in Washington, D.C. because my mother has COVID. So I'm not going to Chicago for 2 weeks, that's for sure. So I'm back in Washington, D.C. Let me get folks rolling here on TikTok. And then, as you guys know, we're going to wait probably 2 to 3 minutes for folks to arrive, and then we're going to get rolling. But have to sort of go live, and then it gives notice, and then it lets us in. So anyway, so if anybody's checking this on recording, feel free to jump ahead probably 2 or 3 minutes. Boom. All right. Well, hello all. I'm wearing my new Ukrainian sweatshirt that we're auctioning off. Oh, technical difficulties. Hopefully yours and not mine, I'm hoping. So, hi everybody. Hey JSM. Hey y'all. So check this out. I'm wearing my new Ukrainian sweatshirt. Of course, I'm in principle auctioning them off. So, but they're made. They were made by, well, actually Vlad had them made, I think, but they were made for the volunteers for the Ukrainian charity that we work with, the Meals for Wheels charity. Thank you for the gift there, Dr. Shane. And Vlad got some extra, so he shipped them to me in the States, and I've got like 6 of them of all sizes total, and we're auctioning them off on the Discord. So just to remind folks, they're pretty cool. And actually, on the bottom, it says it in English, peace to Kharkiv, which is, the organization is Kharkovu Mir, which is, I would say, peace for Kharkiv, same difference. And some of them say Ukraine and back. This one doesn't. Does it? I don't think so. Some of them say Ukraine and back as well. In any case, so we will start. Actually, I think we're going to start right now. So you can find the sweatshirt over at our Discord. We're auctioning them off, and half the profits go to Ukraine, half the profits support my work. And I am not in Chicago. Folks can explain. I'm mom has COVID. I was literally on the street corner. The lift was a block away. I kid you not. And I get a call from mom. I've got COVID. Thank you, Annie, for the gift. And I literally was like, hang up. I've got to cancel the lift. I literally was like, hang up. So I'm looking at this lift down the block, and I'm like, cancel. They actually canceled it and didn't give me a penalty, which I felt bad for the driver, but I thought I was going to be paying my penalty. I was willing to. So then I ran inside and was like, cancel my flight. So it was a crazy day, but all worked well. Anyway, so anybody who keeps asking about mom, if the rest of you want to just like type in, well, actually, okay, fair enough. On Twitch, I'm assigning you on Chris on Twitch. Mom has COVID, couldn't go to Chicago. So I'm waiting 2 weeks. All right. Anybody else ask? Feel free to let them know. So welcome, everybody. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report, my nightly show Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. As always, I've got you TikTok folks here on my iPad. I've got YouTube and Twitch and everybody else here on my laptop. So when you see me talking to you, you'll know why I keep looking back and forth. Okay. So the way this works is the first half of the show, I will tell you the latest news, what I think is important, what's going on behind the news, hopefully, because that's sort of my specialty. What I try to give you guys sort of some inside insight to what's going on with the news. And second half, I'll take your questions. You can certainly pose questions now on TikTok, at least. Well, TikTok, you can pose them in the Q&A link in my profile, because that way, even if you pose a question now, in half an hour, I can see it. So Q&A in my profile, you'll see the link. For the rest of you, you can use the bottom of the screen. Little hard for me to see questions during the show until I get to the Q&A, but I always promise if you submit the super chat question on YouTube, I will always make that the next question I answer anyway, as a thank you for supporting me. And yes, I do need your continued support. Keep in mind, I do this for free. I've been doing it for free since the war broke out over a year ago, sort of made this my full-time job. I mean, I've always done social media, politics, activism, journalism, you name it, foreign policy, but I decided to do this full-time when the war broke out. So when you guys buy me the gifts on TikTok and the YouTube questions, you are literally supporting my work and helping me keep doing that. So thank you. Oh, and then mods, please keep telling people about the sweatshirt. We are auctioning the sweatshirts off on our Discord, discord.aravosis.com. They're sweatshirts for the Ukrainian charity we work with, Kharkovu Mir, which means peace for Kharkiv or peace to Kharkiv. But they were sweatshirts made for the staff. There we go. Exactly. The explosion of stuff. They were sweatshirts made for the staff. And I have to say, the funny thing is, Vlad sent me pictures. I hated the pictures of the sweatshirt. Once I got it and tried it on, I was like, okay, this is not a bad sweatshirt. It's the Ukrainian colors, you can see, but it's also a really thick soft sweat. It's like soft and thick. It's a really nice sweatshirt. Anyway, they're for auction on Discord. All right, let's get moving, guys. So today's news. It is day 417 of Vladimir Putin's 10-day special military operation in Ukraine. Russia has increased the intensity. Thank you, Peter, for the hat. Russia has increased the intensity of its attacks in Bakhmut, primarily going for artillery, and they are now focusing much more on airplanes as well, or what do I say, airstrikes as well for Bakhmut. Just to remind you, Bakhmut, as you all probably know, is over here in eastern Ukraine. It's a town still controlled by the Ukrainians. The Russians have been trying to get it for 7 months now. It's not terribly clear why. The town, I know my Ukrainian friends get mad whenever I say this, but the town just doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense why the Russians have been going all out, and they're going all out. They're throwing even more troops, and they're now doing airstrikes. They're basically trying to level the town entirely. They're trying to do to it what they've done to Aleppo and other Syrian towns, where they just literally just scorched earth, destroy everything. And as always, they may have proceeded a little closer. They may have gotten a little more ground. Again, keep in mind, even some of the experts last week on Sky News in Britain were saying that it is quite possible that the Russians are finally going to get control of Bakhmut. Now, it doesn't matter strategically, but it's good bragging rights, because Russia's been building this up in their own media, going, "Oh, the strategic town of Bakhmut, we almost have it." They're lying to their own people. They may almost have it, but they're lying about it strategic. It doesn't help them move on anywhere else. I know, Dan, people understand. I don't mean it doesn't matter. We all love Bakhmut, but it doesn't matter strategically. All right. So a little more. So a couple of the big stories today. So war crimes, really weird. I say weird, but really horrifying story. From Medusa is reporting that a human rights activist named Vladimir Osechkin released recorded video calls with 2 Wagner Group mercenaries in Russia. It's really weird that they're in Russia and they're coming clean on this. But these 2 mercenaries, the Wagner Group, as you know, are mercenary fighters paid for to fight in Ukraine. But they're Russians anyway, but they're sort of a private military outfit, okay? Paid mercenaries, hired guns in essence, right? Well, he releases video interviews of these guys who are 2 members of the Wagner Group, and they're admitting to war crimes in Ukraine. They're horrific allegations. I mean, I'm going to read you the allegations. It's not gory, but it's really gross. Hold on. But you need to know this, because this is what the Russians are doing. Now, mind you, the United Nations investigated. They found almost no war crimes committed by the Ukrainians. They found 2 instances of Ukrainians quite possibly killing Russian prisoners of war. That would be a war crime. Those Ukrainians should be brought up on charges, and whatever one does to them, do to them. So absolutely. But the UN said, this is about a month ago, that was all they found. They found every other war crime, and they said there were lots of them, were all from the Russians. Nothing, mind you, the UN, which isn't exactly a body that's, the United Nations is often a friendly body to countries like Russia and China and the rest of them. Even they said it's Russia. Now listen to this. So he releases video of 2 former Russia. Oh, this was it. So they're Wagner Group prisoners, meaning they were Russian prisoners in Russia in the penal system, committing felonies or whatever. And the Wagner Group came in and said, "Hey, work for us, and we'll expunge your record." And the prisoners said, "Okay." So they fought for Wagner Group as commanding officers in Ukraine. They admit in the video, I'm going to read you. This was from, I'm already forgetting. Shoot, I really apologize. I think this might be the summary from Kyiv Independent. I think it is. They admit in the video to multiple atrocities. One confessed to ordering the execution of 70 prisoner recruits. So of 70 members of their own squad who were recruited from prison, ordered 70 of them executed because they refused to carry out orders on the battlefield. Now remember, what was going on in Bakhmut, especially, the Russians were literally ordering these prisoners that they, conscripted into the military or whatever, not conscripted, but had them come in exchange for expunging their record. They ordered them to basically go and kill themselves. They said, just run at the front line of Ukrainians. And they were like, well, we're going to get shot and killed. Doesn't matter. They were happy to use the prisoners' lives against them because when it comes down to it, the Russian population isn't going to be nearly upset about prisoners getting shot dead as they would, their own boys and their boys back home. So listen to this. In Bakhmut in January, he carried out an order to throw more than 24 grenades into a pit filled with dead and wounded Ukrainians and Russians before dousing the nearly 60 people with gasoline and burning their bodies. He said he killed 10 teenagers and more than 20 unarmed Ukrainians on the orders of superiors, including instructions to, quote, cleanse a residential building, killing everyone inside. Another soldier says he murdered children in Soledar and Bakhmut, saying he and his men, this is eastern Ukraine, saying he and his men were ordered to, quote, eliminate everyone, men, women, elderly, and children. He described firing a second bullet, meaning he shot one bullet, came back for a second bullet at the head of a 5 or 6 year old girl to ensure she was dead. This stuff is obviously sick. Sorry to bring it up, but people need to understand what we are facing there. And I will say, this is one of the reasons why, I would say this is the reason why you hear so many of the defense experts talk about how important it is to take on Russia in this war. Russia is the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was, I don't want to say awful, horrific. They were a brutal dictatorship. They would do anything, and they did anything. They held half of Europe captive since World War II. The end of World War II, they brokered a deal. The Russians did with the Soviets did, which were basically the Russians, with the Nazis, and they took half of Europe. And they kept half of Europe captive. They dominated. I mean, they literally occupied half of Europe for 45 years and installed communist dictatorships in those countries, horrific dictatorships. And now you see Russia again, and I've got another story on that coming up, becoming such a dictatorship again. Ukranka Christ is saying Russia's worse than the USSR at this point. I mean, it's, again, important to bring this stuff up because you need to know just how bad these people are. And it tells you at the same time why it is so dangerous to empower them further. And by the way, we're going to talk about empowerment a little bit later here. A Russian court, this is, I mean, there's a lot of other news, but the other really big story today, because it's big in terms of what it tells us about what's happening with Russia, is that a Russian court has sentenced a Russian opposition politician who also happens to be a British citizen. He's a British citizen born in Russia, Vladimir Kara-Murza, to 25 years in prison simply for having condemned the war. 25 years in prison. Now, excuse me, Financial Times reporter Max Sidon, who I really like, who I follow on Twitter. Thank you, Inspired Woman, for the cactus. Please keep coming. The gifts coming on TikTok, guys. Max Sidon of Financial Times said, even by the standards of Putin's crackdown on dissent, this is an astonishingly draconian sentence. I mean, even as dictatorial as Putin has turned Russia, this 25 years shocked people. Now, a little more on Kara-Murza. He was convicted of spreading disinformation about the army, collaborating with an undesirable organization, and high treason. He worked as a journalist as well as an advisor to leading opposition figure Boris Nemtsov, who was assassinated near the Kremlin in 2012. I believe he's the guy who was walking near the Kremlin, and somebody, mysteriously assassinates him on the sidewalk and drives away. Who do you think that was? He was twice poisoned. He blamed it on the Kremlin in 2015 and 2017. Again, this guy publicly opposes the war. He was sent to jail for 25 years. And of course, Russian jail system, Russian penal system, even worse in terms of what it actually is going to do to you. It's a dictatorship, folks. I mean, they've turned back into the Soviet Union. And this is something I've been worried about and I've been warning about. And this is why you don't just say, let's worry about China instead. Of course, we worry about China. But you see the things Russia's doing. You see how bad they are. You see what they're doing in Ukraine. You see the human shooting a little girl in the head twice to ensure she's dead, a 5-year-old girl. These are the kind of people who could move on to Poland next. They could move on to the Baltic states. They're sure as hell not, if we let them win in Ukraine, they're sure as hell not the kind of people that go, okay, I've had my fun. Now we're going to be good, upstanding citizens after we won this, Let me tell you really quick about my Discord. I know, kind of a scary segue from something this awful to the Discord. As I was saying at the start of the show, we do have a Discord community. One of the neat things about the Discord is I do auctions as far as the. Oh, thank you for the super dog there, Don. We do auctions to benefit Ukraine and also just to give you guys some cool stuff. So since the war started, I've been or actually since the summer, I think we may have started the auctions. It was Syndicate's idea, I think, a friend of ours on the forum here. And we've been auctioning off cool stuff we get from Ukraine, mostly stuff from Ukraine, some of my personal stuff too. And half the proceeds go back to Ukraine. Lately, we've been using a lot of the proceeds to buy camouflage nets for the Ukrainian troops because it's one of their top priorities. We've also then been taking half the profits and they go back to support my work because quite literally, I do this full time and I'm doing it for free. This is my job right now. And the only money I get from this is from you guys. So thus, I've been trying to find ways to make money so I can keep the show going, and one of them is the Discord. Now, I'm going to show you really quick because I put up a ton of really cool stuff on the Discord this weekend for the auction, and I'm going to show you because, trust me, this may be the coolest stuff I put up yet in total. So first, what everybody loves, the Azov-style steel bracelet. It's the bracelet with the Ukrainian trident on it, made from the steel from the Azov-style plant, which is where the 2,000 Ukrainian defenders were holed up for like 2 months against 14,000 Russians. Anyway, the Ukrainians made these bracelets, the Ukrainian government, out of the steel from that plant to honor the troops. They don't make those anymore. Those are probably our best auction item. These are really neat too. It's a fridge magnet, but it's a fridge magnet of Ukrainian stamps from Ukraine. Thank you. Who was that? Thank you for the hat, Andrew. Ukrainian stamps that have it's the stamp that shows the Ukrainian soldier giving the finger to the Russian warship Moskva. The Moskva is the ship that, do you remember the ship that at the beginning of the war, it was literally first day of the war, the Russians show up at Snake Island and they say, Ukrainians surrender. And the Ukrainian commander gets on the phone, on the horn, and says, Russian warship, go F yourself, about us surrendering, right? They get captured. Some of them, I think, died. Most of them survived, captured. Well, 6 weeks later, the Ukrainians sank the Moskva. They developed their own missile, this Neptune cruise missile or whatever it was, but it was called a Neptune, and the Ukrainians sank the damn thing 6 months later. So that stamp it's a famous Ukrainian stamp showing the middle finger to the boat. Matches. This is really cool. We're showing the auction items really quick from the Discord. This is really neat too. I don't want to take it out of the bag because I don't want to get it messy. This is Lada, who is the goddess of motherhood and the earth for the Ukrainians, for the Slavs going way back, obviously not anymore, but it's this beautiful stamp, but I'm going to try to get close enough you can see. It's this woman's drawing that is absolutely stunning. It's and you've got to see it in person because it's basically red and orange and like sunset colors. Absolutely stunning. Two more. So the sweatshirt, as I said, we're auctioning off the sweatshirts. These are sweatshirts that Vlad had made for Harkovu Mir, which is the Meals for Wheels nonprofit charity that we work with in Ukraine. And they're the Ukrainian colors, yellow and blue, and super comfortable. We're auctioning those off. Я говорю немного по-русски, but not украинский, or по-украински. I don't know. Ukrainian, I don't really speak. Russian, I've got a little bit. Oh, and the final thing, which actually goes with my sweatshirt, are this really cool wall hanging that is another Ukrainian stamp, modeled off of another Ukrainian stamp that is the famous tractor pulling the tank. Because remember how at the beginning of the war, thanks for the hat there, Ellen. Remember how at the beginning of the war, the Ukrainian tanks kept, I've got to put my shirt up to block the sun. The Ukrainian tractors kept pulling the Russian tanks that were abandoned. So this is for that. This is really cool too. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get my sweatshirt to cover the wall there, or my shirt. Didn't know the sun was coming out today. One moment. There we go. Okay, that's better. The sun was hitting the folks over there. Anyway, these are all cool things in the Discord. We're auctioning them off. Like I said, I think it's probably the coolest stuff we've had yet for the Discord, but check it out. Half the profits go to Ukraine. Half the profits go to support my show. Because as I said, I do this full time, do it for free. And your guys' gifts help keep me going. So thank you for that. Please keep the gifts coming. All right, let's keep going here. Russia had to oh boy. So Russia's shutting down the inspections of the grain deal again, putting the whole deal at risk. So you remember last year that Russia, oops, sorry, do my itchy my nose and have some water first. You remember last year that Russia was basically threatening to torpedo all the Ukrainian ships. Thank you, Inspired Woman, for the cool UFO landing thingy. Thank you. I did see your confetti, Tom. I did because it happened. It happened right when I was saying I was saying something that was like, what was it? Hang on, now it's bothering me. I did see it. I don't remember what it was. I was saying something that would have merited like yay. Oh, and maybe it was the sweatshirts. I was talking about the sweatshirts and how cool they were, and your confetti went off, and I said, "Yay, confetti!" Anyway, sorry about that. I did see it. I thought I mentioned it. I apologize. So Russia has shut down inspections of the grain deal. The grain deal, basically, the Russians were threatening to basically shoot Ukrainian ships at the beginning of the war. War starts in February. We get all the way to the July, where Ukrainians are not able to export their grain. Ukraine's one of the biggest exporters of grain in the world, and grain products, sunflower, this kind of stuff, right? Sunflower oil, this kind of things. Not grain, but I mean agricultural products. So the Russians threaten to blow up their ships. A lot of the grain, actually, the number one export for the grain is to China, interestingly enough, right? Kind of interesting. Russia's ally, and you don't mess around with China. Well, the Russians finally agree to let Ukraine export the grain. There's a whole deal up to inspect the ships so they don't have weapons and blah, 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 blah. Turkey's part of the deal. United Nations, Russia, and Ukraine. Works out the deal. Russia's been whining from the beginning about the deal because Russia basically was using the grain as extortion, right? I mean, okay, these are people who shoot 5-year-old girls in the head twice to make sure they're dead. That was the story at the top of the show. You can imagine, you are probably not surprised. Thank you, Allie, for the dog. You are probably not surprised to know that the Russians were using grain to basically threaten the rest of the world. They wanted to basically hold the Middle East and North Africa, especially Africa, hostage. They wanted to create a famine in those areas, because what happens if there's a famine in Africa and the Middle East? People leave and they go to Europe for help. And when they go to Europe, they create more refugee crises that can potentially destabilize the governments there. This is what the Russians were doing, okay, with all of this. So finally, the grain deal gets worked out. Russians keep trying to screw it up. What do? They shut down the inspections again. So now the grain deal's grinding to a halt again. There's at least 50 ships trying to get through to Ukraine. They're stuck. They can't transport the grain. And again, keep in mind, final point here is that the largest share of the grain, the number one country that gets the grain from this deal is China. I didn't mean to say that like somebody, China. So, I mean, interesting as far as politically what's going on with China, that the Russians are stopping their grain from arriving. This is an interesting story too. So a Russian general is back. So there's a Russian general that was removed from Ukraine, from a major role in Ukraine in January. And now it's April, and Putin's brought him back. And this was the British Ministry of Defense noting this today. And they said his name is, if you care, General Colonel Mikhail Teplinsky. He was highly likely returned to a major role in Ukraine, previously dismissed in January 2023. He's likely one of the few senior Russian generals widely respected by the rank and file military. His recent turbulent career suggests intense tensions between factions within the Russian general staff about Russia's approach in Ukraine. Meaning the fact that this guy basically gets fired or demoted, putting on my light a little stronger here, that he gets basically demoted in January and now gets brought back to a senior role in the war, means they don't know what they're doing. They keep, well, one of the expressions I learned in law school that a lot of people talk about is that I've been really busy today. Tom, I know I'm talking fast today. Sorry. I've been working all day on this crime issue. We've been nailing this guy who was basically burglarizing all of our buildings in the area, stealing things. But I mean, it's been nonstop with this guy for months. We got him caught last week. The police are not always the best in our town. And I've been working all day on this case. So I've been putting the news together for you guys, but for several hours, I've been back and forth. The police even told us the guy was released. I finally had somebody get on the phone with the prison. They go, he's not released, he's here. So it's been anyway. So that's why I'm like, oh, you saw me on TV. That's funny. That was me Friday night. So that's why I'm like ginned up right now because all day I've been having my crime fighting uniform on, my cape. So I'm still ginned up from working on that case with this guy. So yeah. So what they're saying is the fact that this general was kicked out in January and then brought back now into Ukraine means turmoil, right? I mean, you can imagine any organization you're running. You take like one of the top guys and you say, you're out. 3 months later, you go, please come back. It not only shows that you're lost, you don't know what's going on, things aren't going well. It also shows what the British Ministry of Defense was saying, that you've got these different factions. In other words, there was sort of the anti-him faction, and now the pro-him faction is back on top. And by the way, we saw this with Gerasimov, who's the what do you call him? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whatever it's called, in Russia, their version. And you saw him in charge of the war. Then he got like the war taken away from him. Well, now he got the war back again a few months ago. It's just this ongoing turmoil. It's very Elon Musk. It is very Elon. It's also very Donald Trump. And I don't mean that politically, but I mean in the sense of his campaign, especially. He kept changing campaign managers in 2016, but it's very Elon Musk as well. Yeah. But it's a sign things aren't going well when stuff keeps changing that much, which again, in this case, good. Thank you, BJ Gator Girl. What else we got here? Oh yeah, this was interesting. This is a really weird story, but it's worth noting because it's weird, and I think you're going to hear more about it. So there's this woman, and I was watching people on Twitter on maybe Friday start to like dissect her. She's this woman who claimed to be, okay, I've got to pull this up again, but claimed to be either Ukrainian, or I think she claimed to be a Russian, like born in Ukraine or growing up in Ukraine, like in Eastern Ukraine. But she claimed to be from there. And she has Twitter accounts, Instagram, YouTube, like all this huge social media empire. And she's called Dzievushka Donbas or whatever it is, which is, oh yeah, Donbas Dzievushka. Donbas Dzievushka is Donbas girl in Russian, maybe Ukrainian too. But in Russian, Dzievushka's like girl, young girl. So it's the Donbas girl. Donbas, right? Eastern Ukraine, right? Donbas, I've told you this before. Donbas is these two provinces in Eastern Ukraine that Putin really wants. They're probably he really wanted Crimea, but he also really wants these two. So she has this big social media empire. She's a Russian, and she talks. I can't do it. I'm doing I was going to do my Dracula. She talks like this. She's doing her Dracula impression, but she's doing this Russian accent when she speaks. This whole deal. Somebody on Twitter on Friday, and this was great. They're basically the NAFO people, the North Atlantic Fella Organization, which are the people with I consider myself one, but with the cute little dog, and they've been just dogging the Russians, and it drives the Russians crazy. Informal group on Twitter that's just like fact-checking the Russians. Well, the NAFO people find an interview of hers doing her Russian accent, and then at the end, somebody makes a joke, and she laughs and says like, ha, I know. And like whatever she said after the laugh was total American English. And they went, wait a minute, what the hell was that? So they go look around. They find a video. And she claims like she's broadcasting from Donbas, like she's in Eastern Ukraine, right? And she's a Russian in Eastern Ukraine. They find a video of in Chicago, we would say, some chick from Jersey, like, who was born in New Jersey, living in Washington State, and this woman is on YouTube, on a different YouTube channel, with a video like talking like this, and she's from New Jersey, and she's American, and pop, pop, pop. And you can tell it's the same voice, it's the same woman in her face. This woman, but it gets better because it's tied to thank you. I did see the cactus there. Thank you, Cheryl. It is tied to the case of the classified documents that were stolen and leaked. That's what makes this interesting. So not only is she a huge pro-Russian, war advocate for the Russians, which is hideous, and she's involved with this whole network, and she claims other people, not just her, and that's her way of saying, please don't send me to prison for the next 50 years. But she's got this whole network of social media that's interestingly very pro-Russian. I'll put it that way. She spends a lot of time, just like me doing this with you guys, and I ask you to please support my work with the gifts, because if you're doing something full-time and spending a lot of time on it, you still got to pay the bills. I pay the bills because you guys give me the gifts. How's she paying the bills? I'd be curious. Thank you for the dancing cactus there. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't have my microphone plugged into you guys today. Sorry, you can still hear. It's just a little more, in the air. Well, listen to this. The classified documents that kid, Teixeira, whatever, I say kid, I know he's 21 years old, published online, didn't get much attention until let me rephrase this. She says it wasn't her, until her social media network, Donbas Jevushka, thank you, Timothy, shared the documents on their network. And then what do you know? The Russians immediately picked it up and ran with it, and it went everywhere. So now she's in real trouble. I guarantee you she's being investigated. She is now telling the media, of course, now she's a total American. Now she's totally American in interviews and saying, and she's former military. She was, what do I have here? She was a former Navy technician in the Navy. She was, and I don't know what this means in Navy terms, but I was just reading, she was an E7, which I guess was her rank, and it tells you their pay and everything else. So she was an E7, but then she chose to leave the military. And when she left, her records show she was an E5. So she was no longer an E7. Isn't that interesting? Thank you, Elle. With no explanation for why her grade, because basically that's like a demotion, right? Something bad happened, right? I think it was E. I think E is what it is, but it was a 7 to a 5. So she was higher up. She leaves the military at a lower rank, and everyone's going, "What's up with that?" And then she starts doing this. Well, she now is going, I know what classified information is. I didn't do that. Somebody else on my network. We've got people all over the world working on this. I didn't do it. Well, you know who else knew what classified information was? The guy that actually leaked the documents at age 21. He was totally aware of what it was. He was aware of what it was. He didn't care. He leaked it anyway. Saying that you're aware of what classified information isn't really a defense of leaking it, because usually the people who leak classified information are the people who are aware of classified information. Anyway, really interesting, but 2 ranks. Yep. Double check the article, but the article I read said, I remember, because I don't know ranks, I remember E7 to E5, and there was no explanation of why she was demoted. Anyway, this woman's in real trouble, and all I have to say to that is drink. No, it's just water in my cup, but nonetheless, I'll have a drink for that. More news. Well, this is actually good. Ukraine says it has not found Chinese weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine, not found them, used by Russia on the battlefield, which is good, actually, because there's been concern about finding finding little Russian, Chinese parts inside the Russian weapons. And at least they're saying they haven't actually found Chinese weapons, which is good. All 13 MiG-29 fighter jets pledged by Slovakia have been transferred to Ukraine. That's good news. Italy has sent at least 30 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. Some of them are already at the front lines. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, also the U.S. Bradley fighting vehicles. Some of them are already on the ground in Ukraine and have already been photographed or videotaped on the ground in action. They've been painted with the Ukrainian sort of the specific Ukrainian style of camouflage, whatever that is. It was basically green camouflage. But good news, because one of the things I mentioned to you guys before, and my guess is some of the military folks out here could probably tell us even better, but General Hertling, who I really like a lot, who's an American general, retired, headed up the army in Europe. He said, I remember watching him on a few months ago talk about how everyone's talking about the tanks going to Ukraine, but no one's talking about the Bradley fighting vehicles. And his point was, those Bradleys are going to do a lot of damage. I mean, he said in concert with everything else, but he said those are going to do a lot of damage. So it is E75. Thank you. I knew that's what I remembered. Again, the military folks can tell us sort of why specifically the Bradleys are going to cause a lot of damage, but it's good that they're on the ground and they're already being used, which is wonderful. I'll tell my Patreon really quick. So I do have a Patreon as well. Please do check it out. Pretty much every night we're getting 1 or 2 people joining the Patreon, which is wonderful. I appreciate that. But basically, Patreon is a nice way, whether it's me or other creators you find online. Thank you, Kevin, for the super sticker. Other creators you find online. It's a way of supporting their work every month, $5 donation, $10, 25, whatever. And it just charges you every month, gives the gift to the creator. And for the creator, it's nice because you know how much money's coming in. And I always say, I'd like to get to the point where I'm getting enough from the Patreon that I don't need to worry to keep hammering to you guys about the gifts. But it's Patreon's a nice way to do it. It's because it's, again, also for you. $5. I always say if you can afford it, because some people, $5. If you can't pay your bills, $5 is a lot, right? So I don't want anybody who's got money problems to even consider this. But if you're comfortable with your money, thank you, Shane, for the cactus. If you're comfortable with your money and you've been watching for a few months and you like the show and you like the work I'm doing, please consider going over to Patreon and supporting my work. You guys have Patreon at the bottom of the screen there. It's patreon.com/Aravosis. You guys can find the link in my profile. There's a Linktree link that has my Patreon. It has my Discord. It has everything. And if you can help, I'd appreciate it. Because like I said, I do this for free. And the way I'm able to do it is because you guys provide the gifts that pay my bills. So this is my job. So thank you guys. I appreciate you helping. Two more quick stories. Okay, this one's interesting. I think Russia's screwing around. Russian Easter gift for Ukrainian. Okay, I'll have to see. Russia's messing around in the Czech Republic. It's got to be the Czech Republic. It's got to be. I don't know. I'm going to put this up from Malayethos. Someday you'll tell me how to pronounce your name. See if anybody else has suggestions. Although you're on Twitch, people are going to be writing it mostly on YouTube for other ways that you can. I'll save this for later. Is there anything besides donating that we can do in the States to help shape the battlefield? I mean, donating matters a lot, honestly. Donate to me, but you can donate directly to the Ukrainian military. They've got links on the National Bank of Ukraine, I think. So you can just you can donate humanitarian aid through them. You can also donate military aid, like literally money for the military. That's huge. I am not a big fan of donating to large organizations, so I would skip the Red Cross and those kind of things because I worry the UN, forget the United Nations. Too much of the money goes to the big people. It doesn't go to actually the people on the ground that need it. I don't know enough about UA24.org. I just don't remember what that is. Is that the Ukrainian government one? United 24 is the Ukrainian government, right? I'm sure it is. Double check because I don't want to tell you it is, but I think it's the Ukrainian government. Yeah. United 24 is the Ukrainian government group. Google them and you can certainly donate there. Yeah. They're legit because they're literally the Ukrainian government. So, but again, I think the other thing is be vocal about your support for the war online. People need to hear that this matters. People need to see other people talking about that it's important. Politicians need to hear from you. Doesn't hurt to call your local member of Congress or your senator. If you know they're going to be in the area. And again, I used to work in the U.S. Senate. This stuff matters. The personal thing matters for them. If you're in the area and they're back home, show up at a meeting and be one of the sane people that says, I appreciate your support. If you've been giving it for the war, this really matters to me. I think this is, this Reagan, use whatever you need to do to sell it for the others in the audience. But yeah, there you go. I think we gave you your answer already. So Czech Republic, let me tell you about this. So Russia, I think, is messing around with the Czech Republic. As you know, remember a couple months ago, the Czech Republic elected a new, I think he's president. I'm going to check here. President. Yes, president. I always check on president versus prime minister. President, who is a former NATO general, I believe, is a former general. Remember, he's basically the really hot guy. He's like white hair, white beard, looks like he's out of an ad. He looks like he's out of an advertisement for NATO or something. They elect him overwhelmingly pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine. Well, get this. This is the Russians doing this. Listen to this. Yesterday, Sunday, thousands gathered in Prague to demand the resignation of the pro-Ukrainian Czech government because of cost of living increases. The demonstration was organized by the PRO populist political movement, whose leader has said that Russian attack on Ukraine is not our war. Actually, from what I read before, they're also suggesting that that movement may have ties to Russia. You connect the dots. The country overwhelmingly elects a president who is a former NATO general and who is pro-NATO and pro-Ukraine, and a couple thousand a couple thousand people in a country of many million protest to say this government has to go because they're supporting Ukraine. Yeah, you know what's going on. It's the Russians. We will see this happening in other countries as well, I guarantee you. Kevin, thank you. I try not to use last names in case people don't want to be identified. I never know. But Kevin just gave a very generous gift on Patreon. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Kevin. Sorry. My phone lights up occasionally when I see it. So when I actually see it live, I like to call it out. Yeah, I did see that. There was Magical Photo was saying there was a story today. It didn't really matter to Ukraine, so I didn't mention it. But the Chinese government apparently set up a secret, well, he says secret illegal police operation in New York City to track and intimidate Chinese dissidents in the US. And the Department of Justice was able to crack down on it, which is good. Final story. This one's kind of one of those, like, is it funny or not? I'm not sure, but at least it's good news for Ukraine. The Russian army falling apart. A Russian soldier has been sentenced. Oh, Lilia, perfect. I'll get you next. A Russian soldier has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for accidentally shooting his comrade while drunk in Ukraine. The fighter was accused of killing a Russian National Guardsman while intoxicated in a vehicle. He also threatened to shoot a second guardsman during the incident, according to reports. He claimed it could have been the Ukrainians. And the military court did not believe him, which is actually interesting for Russia. And he's now been sent to prison for 10 years. I'm not even gonna comment on it. I'm just gonna, you get it. Oh, you know what? And I didn't mention also, Italy has sent at least 30 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine, which is excellent as well. Meant to mention that. All right. That's it for the news. We've also got a store. Go check out my store as well, store.aravosis.com. Lots of cool things there. You can find it via the link. Oh, thanks for the hat there, Annie. You can find it via the link in my profile on Twitter, on TikTok, or you guys can find it via aravosis.com at the bottom. Thank you. Who is that? Annie for the hat and Donkashane for the cactus. Thank you. All right. Lilia has a super chat question. Thank you for your generosity, Lilia. Patreon has been banning, I heard about this. Patreon has been banning Ukrainian creators for fundraising for the war, even though they aren't. And Patreon kept the account of Russian war propagandists. Yeah, something was going on. Mom's doing fine. Mom is watching tonight. She still got COVID. But we were able to do a, okay, I see CK. I'll get to yours next. We were able to do telehealth with, nurse this weekend. She's on Paxlovid, not to give mom's medical stuff, but I mention it because I'm a big booster on people getting treated for COVID and stuff. And the nurse did tell us, my quick COVID PSA, if you seniors that are up on their shots, so they got the shots, they got the boosters, and they take Paxlovid if they catch COVID, certainly if they have symptoms and they catch COVID, Paxlovid is the antiviral. She said she has practically seen no senior who has had a serious case of COVID if they've been vaccinated and if they go on the antiviral Paxlovid. So just putting that out there so mom's on all of those, hanging in there. So, but anyway, so here's the deal. I had heard about a month or two ago, there was a lot of concern that Patreon was banning Ukrainian creators and letting the Russians stay there. Now, the one thing I don't know, and this is an issue on TikTok and other places as well, I don't know what those creators were posting because, one of the things that I know, I think even TikTok, actually, I remember TikTok did this to, is it Anton? I'm forgetting his name. He comes and joins us a lot. I follow him. What's his name? He runs the Anton with a K. He runs the shelter for animals in Ukraine. Oh, it's going to bother me. I want to give him publicity. Actually, somebody go to my TikTok account and look at who I follow. Anton, but I'm forgetting his last name. Look at who I follow and give his account name or whatever it is so people can find it. But anyway, he was mentioning that he had some issues with TikTok because Kirichenko, there you go. Because he was posting videos of getting these animals, but he was climbing through old buildings that were bombed out and you could hear the bombs or whatever. And TikTok freaked out, I think, and thought you're posting dangerous activities, right? Climbing through buildings with the war going off around you. So what I don't know with Patreon is, what were they posting on Patreon? They were fundraising for the war, but what were they posting, right? And by the way, what does fundraising for the war mean? Were they actually doing fundraisers on Patreon? Were they putting something on Patreon that said, "Hey, we're trying to buy drones for Ukraine," right? I mean, and then Patreon said, you're literally buying things that are being used as weapons in essence, and so that's the problem. I don't know enough of what actually happened. So there you go. But Lilia, those would be my questions. Would be, obviously we don't like the Russians here in this war, but Russian propaganda is not on the same level as somebody raising money for the war. Patreon might be like, look, we don't like propaganda, but how do you stop propaganda? But raising money for the war creeps them out. Anyway, that's just my guess. But I've mentioned before that Patreon. I did on Twitter. I will say this: I had mentioned on Twitter a few times, because I have a large Twitter account, that that Patreon needs to explain itself. I mean, I called them out on Twitter and said, "Look, guys, I don't know what's going on here, but a lot of people are talking about it. It looks really bad. You need to explain this." So I'm with you on that. Sike Art. Thoughts on Poland and Hungary banning Ukrainian grain? Yeah, so the story here is that the European Union opened the floodgates to Ukrainian grain in an effort to help Ukraine, help Ukraine's economy. And the EU, for example, I believe suspended all tariffs on Ukrainian grain because they were trying to help the Ukrainians sell their goods just to get more money into Ukraine, right? Well, what that did was it flooded the European market with cheap Ukrainian grain, which then ended up destroying the market for farmers, for example, in Poland and Hungary. Although Hungary, let's face it, Hungary, you don't know what to believe because the Hungarian government is run by a wannabe dictator named Orban, so nobody really trusts him. But in Poland, it's apparently been hurting the Polish farmers. They've had a glut of grain now because of the Ukrainian grain being cheap and their own grain, that they're losing all this money. So the farmers are getting upset. Poland has an election coming up. So Poland in particular is very worried about, not losing the next election over this. So that's why they've been clamping down on the Ukrainian grain. So I don't know kind of where you go from here and what the solution is, but it's, I heard the story and I said, okay, it sounds like, let me put it this way. It sounds like there are some valid concerns about the grain that I hear, right? So I'm willing to believe that. Yeah, throw more questions here. So I'm in DC because Mom has COVID. Mom is joining us tonight, so she's still alive, fortunately. But Mom has COVID, so I stayed in DC for the next 2 weeks until we're sure Mom is over COVID, since I didn't really want to catch COVID with my asthma and everything else. But what do you do? Thank you for the gift there, Donka Shane. So let me pull up some of the TikTok questions. And like as I said, feel free to throw more questions and feel free to throw more gifts on TikTok. I love those. And here we go. Thank you. Who was that that put it up? Dawn. So yeah, Anton's is Anton Kirichenko. She says Kirichenko. So Kiri. Anton Kirichenko 1, the number 1 drawn as a 1. I was on TV Friday night, if you're in the DC area. Thank you for the hearts. Pediatric nurse. Good to see you again. John, would you rather the Patreon or the TikTok subscription for us who can't do both? I would rather Patreon because Patreon takes less. Yeah. Patreon takes less. I mean, TikTok's nice because on TikTok you can join us on the weekends and stuff, but TikTok, no joke, takes like 50% of the money or actually of the subscription. They take even more. Now, mind you, the subscription still adds up, but if you had a choice, I would say do it at Patreon. Yeah. Because Patreon takes maybe 12 to 15% of the subscription. The subscriptions on here on TikTok, they take probably 60, maybe more. It's really bad. I mean, again, I love TikTok. I defend TikTok against the bans and everything else, but I've told the people at TikTok that percentage in the law, we call that usury. It's not standard for the internet. And frankly, they could use a little goodwill. They could build up a little. Thank you, Chazak, for the money gun. Lilia. Oh, here's what Lilia's saying. Oh, okay. Lilia's saying the point is that they were not fundraising for the war. Oh, one of them runs a YouTube community. These were the Ukrainian creators that were banned on Patreon. One of them runs a YouTube commentary channel and used Patreon to support himself. None of it went to the war. Another one was a charity. Okay, that's really weird. Okay, then that's really weird. That makes, again, my only question would be, were they posting videos of the war? Were they posting war videos? Like, I mean, videos of tanks getting blown up or I don't know what, but something where the video itself was, oh my God, that's R-rated. You can't show that on here. Because I can't imagine, let me put it this way. I can't imagine Patreon being an American company would get away with simply saying, we're going to ban you if you literally just are a Ukrainian creator, and quite literally, like me, you just say, I need to make money to keep creating news about Ukraine, and I'm using Patreon to create that news, that money. There's no way that would violate I agree with you. It's outrageous if they did. I have a hard time believing that that's why. But again, my only question here, and this is the lawyer in me speaking, by the way, lawyer and journalist. I have learned over my, turning gray number of years life that a lot of times you hear stories that sound outrageous, and then when you get the details, you go, okay. And that's the only reason I'm saying I would want to see literally what was, you may be right, but I want to see what's on those channels, what they were posting before, because maybe they did post a video. I mean, I remember once seeing a video that I didn't even realize. I think I'd posted a video that I had no idea at the end of it was like a tank getting blown up, which was impressive that the Ukrainians, basically it was to show how bad the Russian tanks were, right? I'm a lawyer by vocation. I went to Georgetown for my law degree, but I don't practice, Woodlander. But the video I posted showed the Russian tanks are really bad, and the Ukrainians have gotten good at basically, if they can drop a grenade or whatever at the top of the tank blows off and it shoots into the air, like the turret, the sort of the round part with the gun that turns around on a tank. These things would shoot into the air because the Russians designed these stupid tanks where the poor men sitting in the middle of the tank, there were explosives all around them. And basically, if you hit those explosives, they would go off in a circle, kill these guys, and shoot up into the air. Well, I was trying to show how horrible these Russian tanks were set up. And somebody pointed out to me at the very end of the video, you see a body falling out of the sky. And I was like, no way. And I went and looked, and I immediately deleted the video because I was like, holy shit. So, I mean, some of these videos have bad stuff. And that's my point. I don't want to belabor it because maybe Patreon did just decide to be jerks. But if they did, hopefully, I mean, that should be an easy fix is my point, if that was what it was. And I have not heard more about it, so I don't know. All right. Yeah, the Russian tanks, though, I forget what they were calling it. They even had an expression for the tanks, the top blowing up. Thank you, Happy Beach, for the cactus. It's using money to fund weapons. Yeah, I just would want to know what, I don't know. What's happening with Trump? I don't think anything's happening with Trump lately. I mean, you're not really seeing the news because there isn't much happening, I think. Eve Killer 66 or Eve Kyler Killer. Eve Kyler 66. That's a little nicer than Eve Killer. Did you see the statement from Lavrov about ending the war? Yeah. So the Russian foreign minister was in Brazil, I think, today, and made a statement about, Russia wants the war to end as soon as possible. Well, of course they do. They don't want to. If Russia has a choice, would they rather commit genocide in 1 week or in 10 years? Well, they'd rather get it over in a week. So of course they want the war to be over quickly. I mean, do you get it though? Like he was trying to say it as Russia wants the war to end soon. Of course we do. And it sounds like one of those like, oh, isn't that nice of him? Until you realize they're the ones committing the war. Of course, it's like saying you're in a prize fight and you want it to end quickly. Yeah. If I'm mugging you, I want the mugging to end quickly. Yeah. I want to get your money and run. So, I mean, so to me, that's BS from them. And that's a cute little, it's cute. It's his cute little way of playing games by saying that. He was trying to make it look like we're we're for diplomacy. It's not really what he meant. He means we want to win fast. So, yeah. So I obviously put no stock in it anyway, but for my tastes, that's what he was meaning. Thank you for that, Eve. That was nice of you. No, this is a good question. So, Malayethos, you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce your name one of these times. I'm going to keep trying to pronounce it like Greek or something. Um, do you think the recent atrocities in Ukraine are a direct psyop, meaning psychological operation, ordered from Moscow, or is it just the vicious nature of the criminal type of military contractors Russia's using? In other words, is it part of some intentional strategy that Russia is killing so many civilians, especially like shooting the children and everything else? Or is it just the vicious nature? It's probably both, because we already know, we knew going into this war, Russia believes civilians are a legitimate target, A, and B, Russia really believes in using, I mean, look what they did in Syria. They believe in just tearing a country apart brick by brick and killing as many civilians as possible in order to cut off support for the military, but also make the government go, oh, okay, no more. We'll make it stop, right? And to kill the will of the people. Now, it hasn't worked in Ukraine, but they were hoping the people would see so much death and carnage of their own people that they would just be dispirited. And of course, Ukrainians don't seem to dispirit much, so that's good. The other thing is, I told you guys, I read this wonderful essay at the beginning of the war, and I don't know where it was. I'm not going to remember now. But this, I think it was a woman, was walking, and she was a Russia expert, and was walking through like current Russian society and the level of violence. Actually, yes, Wild Hunt Corsagery is saying their cruelty is inherent in their culture. She was walking through all the aspects of the culture: schools, prisons, military, all these different areas of the culture where basically violence and cruelty is part of the program. And I mean, we're a violent country in terms of, shooting up every gun shooting that's possible, but we're not, ironically, we're not as violent in the culture as the Russians are at every step. Like, you use violence in school and you're going to go to jail. You know what I mean? Military, I mean, the military folks can tell you violence in the military too. Like, you don't just go shooting people left and right like the Russians do for just, for they're just even disobeying orders. But her article was very compelling on how there is a violent streak in the Russian consciousness, the culture, the mentality, all of that. So I think that's part of it. There is just, and this again, the military folks will probably tell you, my guess is it's also a sign of how bad the Russian military is that they're also this poorly disciplined. I think Hertling may have talked about this before. For example, even the knocking down the drone, where they knocked down our drone out of the sky a month ago, and they were so sloppy about it that they got so close they hit the thing. It was pointed to that was an indication of just how poor of a military, how bad of a military Russia has, how they don't even know what they're doing. And I think that's part of what you're saying. But Cheyenne's saying they've been like that for 100 years. Right. Consequence of the USSR. Honestly, it could go back to the Tsar too. You're not dealing with a democracy. I mean, Russia's never been a democracy. So USSR was horrific. I don't know enough about the Tsar history to know what it was like back then. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, people get upset when I sort of talk about Russia overall and not just the leaders. I think Russia's a problem at its core. After a couple hundred years of really bad governments, you kind of have to start, it's the, what was it on, I always forget the wonderful British comedy show, are we the baddies? I mean, after a while, you kind of have to ask, maybe the reason we keep having horrific governments for hundreds and hundreds of years is maybe we're just not very nice. Maybe we're the old line about you get the government you deserve. Right. The people like authoritarians. The people aren't willing to stand up and have a revolution. I mean, yeah, they had a revolution 1917, they kind of had one 2011-ish, I mean, Stockholm nationalism. I mean, that's one good way of putting it. Yeah. Thanks, RBB, for the cap. So yeah. More water. Scroll more questions. Oh boy. Well, you can't keep writing these things in Greek, Joanna. I've got to translate them. Oh boy. Okay, that Greek is over my head, kiddo. I'm gonna save it. I'll look it up later. It's over my head. I'm getting what I'm. Hold on, I can use my Google Translate. I'm getting something about the light shining on you or shining from you. Let me see. Sorry, somebody wrote what I think is a nice message in Greek, so I'm going to try to translate, although she may have been translating it, but let me see. Oops, come on. The sun shines unexpectedly bright because the sun favors you. Your live news broadcast, our community, our Ukrainian friends. Oh, okay. I got most of it. Thank you. That was what I was getting, was like the sun shines brightly from you or whatever. So thank you. Do you think we're still in the Cold War? I think we're in the Cold War again. That's what worries me. Silver J4 is asking. I mean, I guess you could kind of, you could certainly get into okay. Yeah. Thank you, Lilia, for that. No, I'd love to know more about it. If we can get more on what's going on currently and some of the background, if somebody can get it. Some people might argue, well, the Cold War was a very specific thing and this is different. Maybe, but we are back in the Cold War in a way. The Soviet Union was our rival. Russia's not our rival. Russia is some little obnoxious child that has a big gun. A very immature, I would say immature child with a big gun. Soviet Union was big and scary. Russia's not big and scary. I mean, Russia can push around its poor neighbors. Russia's able to push around Ukraine, even Ukraine, obviously, right? It's been a year, not doing too well. I mean, we helped Ukraine, but Ukraine's the one winning this war. But in terms, I mean, I warn about a new Cold War. I've done it before because at least, John McCain, gas station with nukes, he called it, because at least in general, what is happening is Russia is showing itself to be our enemy again. China is what? Our competitor. What do they call China? Our adversary. Russia's our enemy. Russia's now our enemy again. They are just as bad as they were during the Soviet times. They are less of a threat than during the Soviet times. Obviously their conventional army now, I think we believe, can't touch us. Although we don't really have the conventional army we need in Europe either, right? Because we had cut back after the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. We thought we didn't need a strong conventional army, meaning tanks and all of that in Europe, because the Russians weren't going to invade anymore, right? I mean, it kind of made sense. They're back. They're awful. And again, even though they're not as threatening as the Soviet Union was, because Russia just is a smaller country and much poorer than the Soviet Union, and they've had 30 more years to go down, and they have been going down. I mean, the demographics, their population's been going down, but still, they're very dangerous and they're obnoxious. I mean, they are. Keep going. What motivated you to start the Aravosis Report? Well, actually, this was the war. Yeah, because I started on TikTok like 2 years ago or so. I started on TikTok. I'd always been on sort of YouTube, but never had cracked the YouTube video thing. Twitter, I've used a lot. I mean, Twitter, I've got like 110,000 followers or something. So Twitter, I'd done a lot of web stuff before. So I've always done, I've done a lot of campaigns online, not election campaigns, but campaigns on issues that I've blown things up online, gotten people into things. So I've always done stuff like that. And my friends of mine said, TikTok's this really cool thing. You ought to check it out. So I checked it out, got on it, and I thought, and I saw other people that I read a story about other people who were covering news on TikTok and how it was a very small group. And I thought, well, that's what I do. I've done journalism. I'm a lawyer. I've worked in politics for 30 years. I know foreign policy, blah, blah, blah. So I started covering the news. COVID was exploding. I am someone who is very pro science on COVID. So I was getting a little annoyed about that. And I decided to make a lot of what I was covering about COVID. And the same thing I do here. I figured, you know what? I'm not a doctor, but I'm a smart guy. I know how to read the news. I read the news all day long anyway for the work I do. And I know how to digest information and explain it to people because I work as a journalist as well. I've written for The Economist and other people, right? So I thought, okay, so I did COVID. It worked. I got a big following. And then the war broke out. And COVID was dying down in terms of news. By last year, it was still news, but you know what I mean? And the war broke out, and I care about the war. I mean, I don't like the Russians. I grew up during the Soviet years, not all of them, but I had 3.5, almost 4 decades of the Soviets. Well, no, that's not true. 70, 80, 90, 3 decades. 3 decades of the Soviets. Was not a big fan. I think I told you guys, I wrote a letter to Brezhnev, the Soviet premier in the 1970s, because I was pissed at the way he was treating Andrei Sakharov. And I was in high school and I was just pissed. And I mean, I've just always get pissed about things and take action. And I didn't like what the Russians were doing to the Ukrainians. I didn't even know Ukrainians at that point. I knew Russians. And I knew this was the old Russia doing its bullshit again. Anyway, somebody asked why I got involved. That's why that's why I jumped on it. And then, of course, I got to know Ukrainians and everything else. But I don't mean I don't like the Russians. Individual Russians I've met have been lovely. I mean, I've been to Russia a few times, get drunk with them. They're lots of fun. But Russians as a country are a scary lot. And their government is, and their people support the government. And I've seen what they did before as the Soviet Union, and they're doing it again. So there you go. That's why I did it. So, but anybody who knows me knows, like, going back 30 years, I jump on causes that piss me off, which is also why you said I was wired today, and I am, because there's been this serial, like, burglar in the neighborhood, this thief and burglar, that a bunch of us got together and pretty much caught the guy and then tied him to all these other crimes in the neighborhood using the internet, posting videos of, all our videos of the crimes, and other people went, oh my God, that's my guy. And I was working a lot on that today. It looks like, we got him, and it looks like he may be going to jail for decades, because now the surrounding states, I'll stop with this, Maryland and Virginia, because I'm in DC, have warrants out for the guy. He was on probation in one of the states. He robbed our building here. That broke his probation there. So this guy could be going to jail for decades, we hope. So I was very excited, because today that was my point is, I jump on causes and get involved. Do you think Russia will use nukes if pushed into a corner? No, because, Foxy, I don't see a reason they would. And here's the reason, okay? Sorry, quick drink of water again. I think Putin and his government, they're a-holes, but they're not crazy. I mean, Medvedev might be crazy. Who knows? But generally speaking, Putin's not crazy. He's an ass, but he's not crazy. So the thing is, people who worry about whether Putin would use nukes, I always ask them, okay, explain it. I mean, explain to me why he would use nukes. Well, pushed into a corner. Yeah, but what does that mean? What does that mean? Why? Why? I mean, now, mind you, what I mean is pushed into a corner in Ukraine. I don't mean we invade or the Ukrainians go and take Moscow, right? If the Ukrainians threaten to take Moscow, they're going to get nuked. Yes. But in terms of what's happening in Ukraine, let's say, for example, that the Ukrainians do launch an attack to take Crimea. That's like Joe Biden's worst nightmare. He won't say it, but it is, because he's afraid of angering Putin, right? Escalating. And, the concern is, what if Putin uses nukes? Well, people who know more about nukes than I do, I mean, I worked on arms control issues, but, this is like nuclear theory, when you would use weapons in war, et cetera, have said there is zero advantage to Putin using nuclear weapons in the war. In other words, from a military perspective, him using these battlefield nuclear weapons, these tactical nuclear weapons, and they're small nuclear weapons. It sounds crazy to say, but they are. They're small. You can adjust the yield. So it's a very small bomb that maybe you use to ensure that you've blown up a military. For example, if you were trying to blow up the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., you might use a small, whatever, or a little bigger bomb, but you wouldn't need one to destroy all of Washington if you didn't want to destroy all of Washington. Anyway, they're used for things like that. They're used for specific targets you're going at, not cities. And the military folks have said there's no benefit. There's literally no benefit to them using these bombs. They're not going to get a benefit in the war. Sorry, let me scroll down and make sure I'm not missing some of you here. Sorry. I just saw super sticker. Thank you, Alyssa. Sorry, I saw the colors here and I realized I may have missed some. Okay, Cliff. I see Cliff. Okay, Cliff, I will pull you up in a second. Alyssa, thank you for that. Actually, I'll put you on the screen so I don't forget Cliff. So the military folks have said him using nukes gets no advantage. It won't help him in the war. It's not like the Ukrainians have all their troops in one place and you blow them all up with a nuke. It's not going to happen. Thank you for the gift there. Who was that? Sorry, I'm trying to see. Oh, there was Mishka. Oh, thank you, Mishka. It's not like the Ukrainians are going to cave because Russia used nukes. So there's that possibility too, right? That, what if they use nuclear weapons to try to convince the Ukrainians, oh my God, right? Break the will of the people. Well, we know Ukrainians. I mean, what's going to happen. Thank you, Spirit Seer, for the crown. If the Russians use a nuke, the Ukrainians are going to get 10 times more pissed off. That's what's going to happen. They're going to become an even bigger thorn in Putin's side. So The military folks believe, the strategy folks think there's no rational reason Putin would use the nukes in Ukraine. So, I mean, I just don't. And if he uses them, I think NATO enters the war. He uses nukes, and I think NATO enters the war. And what that means, we'd see. Whether that means we actually bomb Russian troops, whether that means we destroy the Russian naval base in Sevastopol in Crimea, whether that means we establish finally a no-fly zone over most of Ukraine, I don't know. But I think he uses nuclear weapons, and there's no way to stop us from getting involved. And if we get involved, we win. I mean, basically, nuclear war, we all die. Conventional war, meaning a war short of nuclear weapons, we win. We win. NATO wins easily a war that doesn't involve nukes. And if nukes are used, we all die. So again, why would we use nukes? No, it's a scary concept, but it's, obviously, and it's nothing we should brush off, the nuclear threat, but it doesn't really make sense. The same reason we wouldn't use nukes first is the reason they wouldn't either, because we're afraid of the other guy. Yeah, and there you go. JSM is saying China would snub them. India would probably snub them as well. So they would lose some of their top allies. If China backs Russia, that's a whole other problem. Geeky Panda's asking, what if China backs Russia? Yeah, that would be, meaning weapons and everything, that would be bad. That would be very bad. Yeah. So Cliff Wolf is saying or asking with a super chat question. Thank you for that, Cliff. Why do Biden and Milley's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here, so our top uniformed military official in the U.S., easily say U.S. troops to Taiwan. Oh, I see. Invaded by nuclear China, but has never said, I see. Okay. Why are Biden and Milley saying that the U.S. would send troops to Taiwan if they're invaded by China, which has nukes, but they've never said Ukraine must win? Because basically, and I agree with you, Biden has pulled punches on Ukraine and he said, but Russia's a nuclear country and we have to do everything to avoid going to war with a nuclear country. We can't get involved in Ukraine. If there's a war and we get involved with our troops, that's it. It's World War III, to quote Joe Biden, meaning the world ends, because they're a nuclear country. Well, guess who else is a nuclear country? China. And Biden has said repeatedly, so he means it. Biden has said repeatedly, if China invades Taiwan, we are putting American troops on the ground, period, and going to war with China. Well, China's a nuclear country, so why isn't that World War III? It's a good question. I mean, and frankly, it's a little weird because I think the way he's treating China is appropriate. You've got to stand up and show a little backbone and say, don't you dare. And I think it's the same thing with Putin. That's what I was going to tell you. There was a story today, and it's in The Guardian, and it was quoting I'm trying to remember, was it a UK group that got together, I think? I'm not sure. I don't want to anger the Brits here, but it's an article in The Guardian. It said like the security group got together and decided that, yes, it is urgent that, what was it? It was something about it's urgent that we push Zelensky. Oh, thank you for the rose, Annie. That we push Zelensky to reaching a deal with Russia, even if it means Ukraine giving up Crimea and giving Crimea to Russia. And I read that again, and I was like, why? Why? He's going to nuke us? He's not going to nuke us. All you have to do, and I would argue this, Putin, we know Putin. Putin, if you don't stand up to him, he gets even worse. When you cave to Putin, he sees it as weakness and goes, this is great. I can get 10 times more. These guys are scared. They're budging. You're backing down. Say you're afraid of me, then I'm going to make you even more afraid and get even more. I realize, and yeah, we're talking about possible war, but that's kind of, obviously we don't want to go to war, but that's kind of one of the ways you avoid war is making yourself strong and standing up to bullies and making clear where you stand. And if anything, we have made clear where we stand with China. I don't think we've made clear where we stand with Ukraine. If I were Russia, I'd go, it's actually not clear what the hell America will do if we start winning. If Russia starts winning the war, and literally starts taking more and more Ukrainian land, what's America going to do, right? If Russia starts moving into the rest of Ukraine, somehow magically they were able to start doing that. What would America do? If Russia somehow magically were able to figure out how to take Kyiv, the capital, I don't know what the hell Biden would do. And that's kind of dangerous when you don't know what he'd do, But I also don't know that he would put up a fuss. He'd talk a good talk. As you know, I support Biden on a lot of things. I think he's done a B+ job with the war, but I think he's been a disaster in terms of standing up to Putin. I think it's very dangerous. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Sorry, Chris Thane is saying the tactical nukes can be used as a minefield to deny access to areas Poland has. Aldi stated if Russia uses and radiation enters Poland, they will see it as an active war. Well, that's a different thing. Yeah, I mean, if they use if Russian radiation were to enter Poland or, frankly, the NATO countries in the south, Romania, Hungary, Hungary would probably say thank you. Thank you, sir. Give me more. But Slovakia, right? Then you might get that. That would be an act of war. Yes. But it's a good question. Yeah. Why is Biden afraid of Russian nukes, but not Chinese nukes? No, it's a damn good question because he's being inconsistent, basically. I mean, that's the problem. Let me just see here. We're going to wrap up soon. A low B. Well, the thing is, Biden gets credit for pulling the international coalition together. I think he did an amazing job pulling everybody together, right? And I remember Macron's kind of pissed about it. Macron in France keeps saying, right, the Americans, we shouldn't always have to follow the Americans' lead. And he's right. I mean, Europe did follow the Americans' lead on this. Biden pulled the world together very nicely, very much like George Bush did, the first George Bush with with Operation Desert Storm, the good Gulf War, right? The one that was justified and that we did quite well in, where we saved Kuwait, right? So anyway, all right, guys, maybe a couple more questions and then we'll call it quits because we're already 7:18. Hang on, I'm going to, what am I looking for here? TikTok questions, yes. Oh, doing a yawn at you all. It's okay to save oil. There's nothing wrong with saving oil. Somebody's saying we saved oil. We did save the oil. Nothing wrong with that. The world, it's like, I'll do a recap. The world relies on oil. Are you kidding? I was happy to save oil because saving oil saved our economy. Thank you, Nancy, for the galaxy there. Absolutely important. But also we saved Kuwait. He literally ate up another country and we stopped it. So no, I have no problem with that. Why does China still trust Russia? I don't know. I think China overall has been, excuse me, I'm yawning at you all. I was going to take a nap and I didn't today. I think China overall got in a little too deep with Russia. I think from the beginning of the war, Putin went to visit China right before the war, a couple of weeks before. And he probably told them, we're going to do a little, it's going to be a 10-day war. We're going to go into Kyiv. We're going to replace the government. We're going to leave. It'll be free, but we're going to get rid of the crazy guy, the crazy Jew who's there now, right? We're quoting Putin. And we're going to put our dictator or whatever in charge. He then goes in and it's now become a year-long plus war. The whole world is involved and China is at risk of it hurting China's relationships with Europe and America economically, which is a big deal for China. So China is probably no great fan of Russia in many ways right now. I mean, yeah, Russia works for China at this point, but I think China probably isn't terribly happy with Russia at this point because this wasn't supposed to be the big thing, and it is. I mean, we could keep going. Guy says, could the West offer limited support cruise missiles from ships? I mean, we could. I mean, right? Anything like remember when your mother would you say, can I have more pie? Well, you can. It doesn't mean you will. So that's kind of the way I'd put it. Like, sure, but we wouldn't. Clearly, we're not going to give them that. I mean, we're not. Biden is afraid of giving them any weapon that could be used against Russia itself, like the Russian mainland, which strikes me as a little bit stupid, but nonetheless, he's not going to go. I think we've given them what we're going to give them. Sorry, looking here. Oh, there you go. Why? Oh, there we go. That was the question. Why does China still trust Russia? Okay. It's not a crazy question. A little esoteric because I'm not sure I've got the answer. Official Rye guy is saying, what prevents Moldova trying to retake Transnistria now or Georgia striking Abkhazia and South Ossetia while Russia's busy? Not as up on Georgia as I am Moldova, but I know of it. Basically, I mean, Transnistria, I'll tell you for sure. I mean, the Russians have been involved in Georgia, basically invading and like they're occupying like 20% of the country of Georgia, former Soviet Republic. Okay. Then you've got Moldova. Moldova, more or less over here. Transnistria, more or less region of Moldova over here that Russia invaded a long time ago and basically has preserved it's really like a communist dictatorship. I was watching a thing about it recently. It's like this vestige of old communism. It's really weird. But you can visit, which is interesting. And the problem is, well, the Russians only have a couple thousand troops there in Transnistria. The Moldovans would like it back. Moldova doesn't really have much of a military, though, so I'm not sure what ability they have to take it back. Certainly, they were worried if they ever tried to take it back that the Russians would invade. The Russians are now very busy in Ukraine and getting their butts kicked, which does potentially open them up if Moldova had the ability and if it was strategically wise. That I don't know. But it does open it up to more, let's put it this way. If you wanted to take on Russia, now would be the time. Yes, because Russia's occupied in Ukraine. They spent a lot of money, a lot of manpower, a lot of whatever. And starting another battle elsewhere would be a real pain for Russia, whether it's Moldova, whether it's Georgia. But do the Moldovans and the Georgians have the power to even do it? You know, and Coppice is saying they have no ability, few thousands with really old Soviet weapons. See, that's the thing. That's the thing. I don't think they've got much of a military. Let's see if, hey, Google, what's the size of the Moldovan military? 6,500 is the size of the Moldovan military. So, you know, the Russians send 10,000 and wipe them out, basically. And you then run the danger of Russia literally taking all of Moldova, potentially, right? So that's the deal. Yep. All right. Bash Brannigan, U.S. stop support Ukraine coalition collapses. Oh, sorry. You must have had an earlier half to that question, I'm guessing. Let me see. Hold on. That was like a second part of your question, I'm guessing. Hang on. Oh, excuse me. Oh, Putin is not going to use nukes on his deathbed. Somebody was asking. Joanna's asking because Putin thinks he's Peter the Great. He thinks he's going to make Russia great again. That means on his deathbed, he's most worried about being remembered as the guy that made Russia bigger and stronger. He's not going to want to be remembered as the guy that got Russia eliminated in a nuclear war, right? So the deathbed thing doesn't really work, I think, in that regard. On his deathbed, he might do something daring to secure his legacy, but a nuclear war that wipes out the world and wipes out Russia, I don't think gets him anything for his legacy. Well, definitely doesn't get him anything for his legacy. Okay, Bash, I don't understand your full question. Did you write maybe a follow-up that explains your actual question? It says U.S. stopped support of Ukraine, coalition collapses. Oh, I see. So are you saying if the U.S. stops supporting Ukraine, does the coalition collapse? In other words, you know, some MAGA government comes in, you know, Trump wins or whatever. I mean, there are major problems because the majority of the money, or not the majority, but the largest share of the money is coming from America. I don't know if it's the majority. So that's bad, the money and weapons. The Brits would probably have to take over the coalition. You know, Zava, I've only heard that from Russian trolls who are paid by the Russian government. So no, haven't heard that. Sorry, somebody was trolling on TikTok. But yeah, no, it would be very bad. I mean, the Brits would still keep helping. France and Germany would be more empowered, and I'm not sure what they would do. Germany's been better lately. France has been worse. You've certainly got Poland and the Baltic states that would care and still care. You know, you'd still have the NATO commitment, but I'm not convinced Trump, for example, would keep the NATO commitment. I don't know if DeSantis would, right? So, I mean, no, it's a very, if U.S. drops out of the coalition, it's bad. It's very bad. Because also keep in mind, any American weapons, if we drop out, a lot of our weapons are now no longer there. So we will no longer be giving them spare parts for our weapons. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure somebody must have gamed this out as far as the scenario of what would happen. Thank you, Dawn, for that. But I mean, we know it's not good. Correct. All right. Let me do a quick recap, guys, and then we will call it quits. And then I will go and look and see what I've got for dinner. Boom. Russia has increased the intensity of its attacks in Bakhmut, relying on artillery and airstrikes. I then talked about confessions of Russian war crimes by former Wagner Group personnel, which was kind of wild. I mean, kind of horrific. Talking about being ordered to kill civilians, and in one spot talking about murdering a little 5-year-old girl because he was told to. A Russian court has sentenced British slash Russian, a Russian opposition politician who is also a British citizen, I should say, Vladimir Kara-Murza, to 25 years in prison simply for having condemned the war. Russia has shut down. Logan, thank you. Logan just did a pledge on Patreon. Thank you for that, Logan. That was nice of you. Sorry, I saw my phone go off and I was like, oh, thank you for that. Beep, beep, beep. Russia shut down inspections under the grain initiative again, threatening Ukrainian grain exports. Russian general is a lead Russian general in Ukraine who was pushed aside is now being welcomed back, which suggests that there's kind of more turmoil in Russia in terms of, which faction is rising and which is falling and everything else. Pictures from Ukraine show the first Bradley fighting vehicles in use, painted with Ukrainian camouflage. A pro-Russian social media account overseen by a former Navy technician played a key role in spreading the classified documents online. She's now in a hell of a lot of trouble. Ukraine hasn't found Chinese weapons on the battlefield, which is good, meaning so far there's no evidence of Chinese weapons being sneaked into Ukraine and for Russia. Slovakia, all 13 MiG-29 fighter jets pledged by Slovakia have been transferred to Ukraine. Italy has sent at least 30 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. Dobry dzień to you as well, Paulie. Russia, or Dobry wieczór for me. Russia is messing around in the Czech Republic, I think. A couple thousand people protested in the Czech Republic demanding they stop supporting Ukraine when basically the whole country supports Ukraine. So I think it's the Russians that did it. A Russian soldier has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for accidentally shooting his comrade while drunk in Ukraine. He blamed the Ukrainians. He claimed maybe a Ukrainian did it, and the Russian military court was like, I don't think so. You shot somebody else. So they sent him to jail for 10 years, which is a good thing because he's a Russian soldier. All right, guys. That is it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Almost 7:30. Wow, we went an hour and a half. As I said, please check out my Discord. Oh, and check out the auctions. Like I said, I may not wear this every night because it's been warm, but it was cool today, so I thought I could. These are the new sweatshirts that Vlad made for the volunteers with Harkovo Mir, the charity. You can see they're the colors of the Ukrainian flag. It's actually a really nice. I hated the pictures of it. I like the sweatshirt. It's a nice sweatshirt. It's actually a very nice. The yellow's a little brighter than I'm seeing on the screen here. It's a nice yellow and like almost a baby blue, I guess I would say. But you can bid over on our Discord for them. Half the proceeds go back to Ukraine. Half the proceeds, actually, for these sweatshirts, 100% goes to Vlad in Ukraine because Vlad paid for them. So 100% will go back to Ukraine on these sweatshirts. The other auctions are 50-50 to support my work. In any case, thank you guys for helping out tonight. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, moderators, for going after the trolls as always. And I will see you guys tomorrow night. Okay. So what was it? Tomorrow, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, US. And we will see you then. All right. All right. See you guys. I'm signing off. Going to go brush my dog's teeth. It's about that time. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for the gifts.